Welcome to the Covering Data podcast, covering guests from the data, development, and IT world. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Covering Data podcast number 2. I'm Eric with Covering Data Consulting, and with me today is Greg Thayer of New Era Technologies. Greg, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you?
Sure. Yeah, you got it. Hi, guys. I'm Greg Thayer. I am the Information Security Officer at a company called New Era Technology. We were acquired by New Era. I worked for a company called Comworks in Plymouth, basically until 2021 when we were acquired. And in 2022 here, my role transitioned over to our corporate entity, which is New Era Technology. So.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much for coming on today, and look forward to talking to you.
Absolutely.
So I like to start with people's origin stories, to be honest. It's just a fun conversation, especially for us that have been around for a while. You know, everybody has kind of different backgrounds and stuff. So how'd you get into IT back in the day?
Well, I think that, as I go back to, I think, like you said, my origin story, which is, I think, a bit unique for me, how I got into this was, I grew up in Midwest Minnesota on a farm. Grew up in a farming community, and that's what I spent my summers doing, was helping my parents on the farm. And, went to college and thought, you know what, I think I'm just going to go for business management, and we'll see where that leads. I felt like business was a generic enough topic that it could go many routes. So
Right.
After 2 years, I was in my second year of college, and I had a good friend of mine reach out to me that there was a company actually in a little town out west Minnesota called Spicer. That was looking for somebody that had some agricultural experience, computer experience. And little did I know, and that was 1995, that would lead me to where I'm at today. Because the company that I worked for was a software development company that built software for the agricultural industry that worked with Great Plains. And this is back in the days before Great Plains was acquired by Microsoft. So I had the opportunity to go to Fargo a lot for meetings and met with a lot of people. And then I think it was around 2001, they were acquired by Microsoft. But, that really gave me my early start into software, got me more ingrained in databases and stuff like that. But, just going back, I wasn't, really that much into taking apart computers, building things. Really, I wouldn't say that when I graduated from high school, I would have ever told you I was going to go into a career in IT and cybersecurity. That just would have never been in my roadmap. And so it's amazing how, things kind of happen and for a purpose, and kind of who you're connected with and where things go. But ultimately, the company that I mentioned that I worked for in Spicer was acquired by a big company in around that 2001 timeframe. At that point, relocated to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and worked for another Great Plains consulting firm down here, working in consulting for a lot of different companies. And one of the companies that we sold Great Plains to was Comworks in 2002. And I had the opportunity to meet the leadership team there, implement Great Plains for them, and really just enjoyed that environment and enjoyed the culture that they had going there. It was a small company at the time of like 35, 40 people.
Yeah.
And in 2004, I joined them on staff. And, the rest is history.
Right. Well, that's actually pretty cool. For one, I've heard folks who grew up on the farm are really hard workers. I know that a lot of people really like those young farmer boys,
Well, I think that's, honestly, it gives you that strong work ethic of kind of just never quitting, right? I mean, I always tell people that, it was always the hottest days of the summer that you had to go out and bale, right? And bale
Yeah.
straw or hay. And you're out on the hay rack and it's 100 degrees and it's sweating. But you know what? You had a job. You had to get the hay up while the sun was shining. And but you just worked hard. And I think that's, yeah, there's a lot of truth to your statement and what you said, because I
Yeah.
mean, you had to get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's really neat. I actually really love the consulting as well. Like I think I've been doing it. I started as an FTE consultant after really, frankly, getting bored with being like a staff DBA, and it's like drinking through a fire hose and all that kind of stuff. You know,
Right.
it's
Totally.
you learn a lot. And
Yep.
um, so, as for your consulting career, what did you like about consulting yourself? Just out of curiosity.
The thing, that probably, what I really enjoyed about consulting was just the wide variety of clients you get to work with, right? I mean, you get to see um, clients that are very, detailed in their processes, that have very well-defined, PMO type programs in place. And then others that are very, kind of maybe they're just starting out, or maybe they have very immature processes, or things that they need to improve upon. And being able to come in and use my background in implementing software, primarily around the ERP product of Great Plains,
Hmm.
but also being able to work with these, leaders at these companies. Primarily, it'd be a lot within the accounting department, right? The CFO, the accounting director, whoever, working with them because they've got broken business processes. They've got
Yeah.
reasons they're putting in new software. And, I think one of the things I just always like to touch on, because a lot of companies believe, well, if we just go out and buy, you name the product, it'll fix everything. But if
Right.
you don't fix the underlying business processes, you're just spending a lot of money and throwing it away, because nothing's going to change. Yeah, you'll have a new
Hmm.
shiny tool, but you have to address the processes. And that's really where the value comes in.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I see a lot of places where they're expecting new tools to fix the
Yep,
process. And it's like, well, you can kind of help them with that. I mean, especially if you
totally.
have a lot of experience with that, but really what you have to end up doing, kind of maybe even stealthily sometimes, is like training them on at least a little bit of process so that they can be, successful in the tool, right?
Well, and I think, one of the big terms now is, really around organizational change management, right? And knowing that anytime you bring in um, new software, a big application change, you're going to have people that are resistant to the change. Um,
Hmm.
and so it's about getting people on board, helping people understand the why. Why are we doing this? What's the benefit to the business?
Right.
And to help people understand their role in the journey. I think that means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Um, well, more for on the consulting side too.
Yeah.
If there were some young folks that maybe want a little bit more challenge and are interested in consulting, do you have any like thoughts or recommendations for them on, being able to get that opportunity and jump in?
I whenever people ask me and say, "Oh, how can I get into it?" or what do I do? I always say, look, depending on the track you want to go into, right? I mean, do you want to go into, networking? Do you want to go into database stuff? Do you want to go into cybersecurity? Um, you have to get some, I really think, certifications under your belt, right? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of opportunities out there, a lot of platforms to learn on. Um, some of the very basic ones are, your security plus, your networking plus, your the A plus type things, right? Where you can,
Hmm.
those are, I say, the building blocks, right? That's where I always tell the, people that just don't have a lot of experience to say, start there and
Hmm.
work yourself up and really help yourself understand what is it that I like to do? Because those courses will help you understand, am I more of a networking person? Am I more of a database type person?
Hmm.
Development, security. And then once you understand that, do you want to be more of a generalist? Kind of, I want to be able to do everything. But really, I think you know pretty fast to understand. I knew from the beginning, you know, when back in the early days of Great Plains, there was integrations with Visual Basic, right? And you could get in
Yeah.
and you could build pretty cool stuff with VB. And I was like, great, I'm going to get in there and learn it. And I just honestly, I tried and I understood from an early point, I didn't have that development coding mindset, right? I really felt like that part
Right.
of my brain wasn't developed to code. So led many coding teams, led development teams, love doing that. But I myself, I know basic SQL. I know the basic things, but I'm
Mm.
certainly not going to be able to sit down and write a program for you. That's just not me.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's one of the early things that I was taught was you have to know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And you have to understand, you have to know your strengths. What am I good at? What am I not good at? And maybe
Hmm.
those are areas that you need to work on, or just areas that you understand. Like for me with development was I'm just never going to be a developer, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I kind of did both sides of the world, right? I was first an operational guy, and then I really found that I more enjoyed building stuff instead of fixing all the broken all the time. And so, you know, I did okay with coding, you know, depending on the type of coding and projects and whatnot. And you know, found out that that was for me. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, the other thing too, when you were talking about that, it also reminded me like, and you know, this is more kind of my opinion. You know, if you're interested in say Great Plains or something like that, there's probably like a some kind of local user group or something like that that you know has folks doing presentations and all that kind of stuff. And you know, it's really great to network and also you know maybe find a find a mentor or something like that. You know what I mean? Um, just to kind of help level up your game scenario.
Well, and I think, just to kind of, continue on that topic for a second, I think you're absolutely right. There are so many user communities out there, right? There are, maybe, if you really want to get into consulting, you have to be good with people, right? You have to be good
Right.
at starting conversations. You have to be good at leading conversations. And I think, that if you're just not very comfortable with that, one of the other big groups that I've had a lot of friends go through is Toastmasters, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Toastmasters, getting people comfortable with speaking in front of, might be a small group of maybe you're doing training, but it's maybe you want to do future public speaking, right? So I've had a lot of people that were very uncomfortable, went through Toastmasters, and it really kind of built their confidence in being, okay, I can do this, right? I like speaking in front of
Yeah.
people. So anyway, I think you have to get out there. You have to make the connections. You have to work your network, your
Hmm.
LinkedIn. Your team. Leverage who are your people connected to, because I think that's where the opportunity lies. Right? Is
Right.
you have to. It's for me. My whole career trajectory was all based on, okay, who did I know? Who knew that next person to kind of give me that next introduction? And it's that along with hard work, right?
Right.
And being
Yeah.
and I think most of all too, the thing I always tell people is being honest. Is sometimes the truth hurts to tell, because maybe the project isn't going as well as it should be.
Hmm.
Maybe something has failed, and to try to take that message to the leadership team is never fun. But you know what?
Right.
Being honest, to tell people where things are at, and to tell a story of how we're going to get things back on track, and what we're going to do to correct that to make sure it doesn't happen and repeat itself again.
Right. The sooner you address it, the sooner you can make things better, right? Or you know, the leadership team probably knows way more about the situation than you do, so
Right.
they'll have a lot of insight. Like, oh, well, it's not a
Yep.
big deal if this goes behind a little bit, or maybe hey, let's just cut some of this stuff out, or
Yep.
you know, it's always good to just keep an open line of communication often. And
Absolutely. Check in often, early, often.
yep,
If something's going off the rails, don't wait. Right.
yep, exactly.
No, but
Um,
I think back, kind of what started this conversation. I think, yeah, with that consulting mindset, if you want to get into it, and I think you have to, you know, work your network, your connections, get out there, be a part of user groups, take initiative to get some certifications. There's all kinds of free training out there. Some of it you're going to have to pay for, but those are
mhm.
good investments in your career.
Yeah, exactly right. Um, I was a little bit curious about kind of in the security world. How did you start getting interested in security and kind of what made you like go farther down that path?
Sure. At Comworks, like I'd mentioned, I started there in '04, started as the IT manager. We were doing at that point, we had just implemented Great Plains. We were looking at putting in new kind of operational software to handle their field service tickets. Um,
Hmm.
we had portals that our vendors and customers could both log into to manage their work. And we were dealing with really, really companies, right? I mean, the whole mindset of Comworks was, one of the early taglines was one call, we take it from there anywhere. So, you think of when the founder started the business, it was, hey, you have these large companies that have branch locations all over, at that point in time, it started in the US and it grew globally. But you had a big, take your top, your Fortune 50 your Fortune 100 companies, and that's who we were dealing with. So here was Comworks, this relatively small company that had these really large uh, clients that would come to us, and this, probably one of my first interactions that I remember was around 2006. One of
Hmm.
our large banking customers came to us and started asking all kinds of security questions. Well, how do you do this? How do you protect against this? What are your policies, procedures, everything? What do you have in place? And that was kind of my first introduction into, whoa, we got to get our stuff together, right? We
Right.
we got to figure this out. Now, we were a small team and we had pretty good processes in place, but we weren't really, things were done informally, right? There
Hmm.
wasn't a lot of segregation of duties because we were a small team. Everybody kind of wore many hats. So
Yep.
that started the journey of, okay, we need to get the house in order. Um, and fast forward kind of 10 years, and through those 10 years it was, hey, we continued to improve things, we got better.
Hmm.
We continued to have to respond to a lot of different audit questions, and sometimes the client base would want to come on site for a 2 to 3 day audit to really look over things and see proof of everything that we said we were doing. And
Right.
those were those were eye-opening and fun and challenging because you got to sit across from the table of an audit team, and here we were and responding. But you know what? Every one of those we came out uh, performing very well. Um, and that, I tell you that because that was kind of my first introduction into the world of information security, right? And
Right.
understanding, okay, this is getting more serious. Because think about it. Think back, like I said, in 2006, over 15 years ago, we probably weren't thinking much about multi-factor authentication back then. It just,
That's
security
for sure.
wasn't top of mind. It wasn't built into everything we do. It wasn't built into software development. It wasn't built into project management. Now it has to be. So anyway, around that time frame of, in that 2016-17, it was, well, I think Comworks needs to get SOC 2, certified, and need to go through and kind of put our best practices in place, making sure that we can dot our I's, cross our T's, and show our customers that we really mean business. And
Hmm.
so we started, on that journey. We engaged a local company to kind of assist us and to put the right. We had to make a lot of changes to our infrastructure. We had to make changes to our applications and how we identified users and how we reviewed user access and how we onboarded and offboarded, you name it, right? I mean, I could
Right.
go on and on about all these different things. And then okay, how are we going to train people? So how are we going to, when people start, how will we, educate them on what are the things they can do and can't do, and what are like the acceptable use policies and the identity and access management, all that stuff, right? So
Hmm.
those, we were trending to the point of being ready to go through in 2019 to be audited. And then we had this little event happen in March of 20, that the pandemic, and we all went home
Right.
and kind of put everything on pause and said, okay, let's just kind of wait and see. Well, during that time, I said, hey, I think this is a good opportunity for us to do this. So I engaged with an auditing firm, a local team here in town, that we did everything remotely during the pandemic. The course of really March of 20 until March of 21, kind of finishing everything up. And Comworks was, got, SOC 2 in it would have been May of 21. And
Oh, wow.
but that, I should back up for a little bit because I should clarify the question you asked about getting, so I kind of told you the story of how I got more focused on security. But around, I think it was 2019, the company Comworks decided, what, we really need you to wear the hat of kind of, cybersecurity was getting important enough that it was hard for me to wear all these different hats, to lead
Right.
infrastructure, lead the help desk, lead software development, all these areas, that they wanted me to focus. And at that point, I became the company's CISO, right? The Chief Information Security Officer.
Right.
Went out and got certified to ISACA, which is a big governing board. Um, Went out and got certified, which was what they call CISM, which is Certified Information Security Manager.
Okay.
Went out and took a boot camp on that. That was a really intensive 1 week course. Sat for the exam, got certified, and that's really when I really became much more focused on, okay, now it's about making sure that we have all the right things in place, right? Do we have a third party, um, you know, risk management program in place? How are we vetting our vendors, right? Or our
Mhm.
contractors, anybody that does third party um, work for us. And like I said, security awareness and training, all the way down to, the whole, making sure that we led with that zero trust mindset, right? Where we
Right.
said, hey, we're only going to give you, least privilege, right? I mean, the least amount of things that you need to have access to, that's what we're going to give you. So anyway, I'll pause there for a second, but that's really, the company saw the need to have somebody, have a defined CISO on staff, because our clients were really starting to require it because of the clients we were working with, and the audits and the questionnaires started coming in to say, okay, who's your CISO? And that
Hmm.
was part of our strategy. And to say, okay, Greg, you need to, um, mature your expertise that you've been working on for 10 years. Let's make it
Hmm.
official. And, for me, making it official was, like I said, going out and getting my CISM, my certification, just to kind of put one more, you know, acronym behind my name.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, I suppose that story kind of plays out like a lot of other, let's say small and medium-sized businesses. Like they're just kind of is a business need. I mean, I guess reflecting on that a little bit. If there's another company kind of seeing clearly that security is much more important, like when would you say it's important to really start looking at having a dedicated CISO versus having like security guys in the IT umbrella, if you will?
That's a bit of a tough question to answer, and I'll tell you why, Eric. I mean, and this is my
Yeah.
response to that, right? I mean, I think, every company out there, I don't care of your size, you might be two people, you might be 2,000 people, you have to have an information security program in place, right? Um, as a leadership team, you have to make the investment. I equate it a lot of times to insurance, right? We all, insure ourselves for life, medical, car insurance, in the hopes that we don't ever need it. The
Right.
same goes with security. you have to make sure, even getting a cybersecurity insurance policy, right? But in order to get those policies today, you have to be able to show that you've got the proper procedures done in-house, right? Of how you're protecting information. Because
Hmm.
if you don't have the proper safeguards in place, nobody's going to insure you. Okay.
Right.
So, I think, like I said, I don't care of your size, and more of in the SMB space, right? The small, medium businesses. That's the area that these bad people are targeting, right? Because
Hmm.
they know your guards are down, you're more trusting, you maybe don't have those full-blown programs in place. So it's time that you made sure you made security a priority. Now, most of those businesses can't afford a full-time CISO, right? So
Right.
what they have to start with is this notion of that fractional CISO or a VCISO, a virtual CISO, right?
Hmm.
Somebody that maybe spends a quarter of their time working for them and the other three quarters with other clients, but that person is able to come in and risk assess their environment. Okay, is come in, do a formal risk management program, sit down and say, okay, let's look at all the different areas, and I like to uh, really kind of use the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's NIST. It's a national standard, right, for
Yeah.
cybersecurity, and use that to kind of gauge what is the maturity of our organization in a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being world class. We do it better than anybody. Where are we at today? And where do we need to be? And what is that roadmap of how do we get there, right? Because
Hmm.
what policy do we have any policies in place today? Maybe there's
Hmm.
nothing. Okay, let's start with some very basic policies, right, to help people understand, um, like I said, the acceptable use, the identity and access management for how I can access things. Do we have an asset management program, right? And what I mean behind that is, do we know all the assets we have out there?
Right.
Whether it's endpoints, um, do we allow BYOD? Bring your own device. Do we have that out there? We have to know where our assets are, because if we don't know where our assets are, we can't protect that, right?
Yeah.
So you have to really kind of take a look at what's our attack surface look like, and mapping that out, taking that information along with your risk assessment, and really identifying how how much do we need to invest in this area, and really you have to base it on what business are you in, right? Who are
Hmm.
you selling to? Do you use contractors or third parties in your supply chain? And you have to look at all those risk factors to understand how important is it, and how important is it to your clients.
Yeah.
So I think, Eric, ultimately, everybody should be investing something. Maybe it's just somebody that has grown up through IT, that has, matured more in cybersecurity and wants to help kind of lead that. But over, long term, I've met with so many different, companies that said, hey, that's where we started. But now we're at the point we really need that virtual CISO or that dedicated CISO on staff, because we need that
Yeah.
person with that expertise that can help interact with the auditors, interact with the client audit requests, and just kind of, you know, make those board presentations. Because that's the other thing I'd say. You know, years ago, I was always a member of the executive leadership team at Comworks, and I always had an
Hmm.
opportunity to present to the board. And I'll tell you, in the early days, 10 years ago, IT was always I was always the last one to speak in the board meetings, and it really was like, oh, we're running short on time. Greg, do you have anything to tell us? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you in the last few years, it became much more, hey, Greg, you get the floor first, because we want you to have enough time, because we want to know what's going on within the world of, cybersecurity, right? We want to know,
Yeah.
what are the threats out there? What is Comworks doing to protect themselves? And that's the shift I've seen, right?
Right.
Where now all of a sudden it's a leading discussion, because these board members are seeing it at the other, companies that they serve. They're seeing it in their personal life, all these different, attacks happening. And it becomes, well, not only more personal, but also, people understanding, what do I need to make sure, what am I doing to protect the assets, or I always like to say the crown jewels of the company.
I know
So
exactly how that one works.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
yeah, and it's interesting too now today, like your surface area is so much bigger, right? Like using phones somehow for work is ubiquitous, like with chat
yeah,
programs or whatever other apps you have. And there's a lot more um, much more nuanced attacks. Like, to just kind of contrast it, I had to deal with the SQL slammer worm back in like
yes,
01 or 02, right? And
yes, I remember. Yes,
that obviously is a huge deal, but ultimately that was like about sowing chaos. Now there's much more targeted things like, can I basically hijack a company, like, encrypt their drives, or maybe
yeah,
like hold their databases hostage or something like that.
yeah,
And the attack vectors for that are just like there there's so much options there on how somebody can get in
yeah,
and just, be able to get the keys to the kingdom, so to speak.
yeah. No, yeah. The attack surface, like we've been talking about, is so much greater, right? And it's you're hearing it through like you talked about mobile devices, right? Your cell phone is become a major attack vector, and
Mhm.
that's you just can't let your guard down anywhere, because if you do, people will compromise you.
Yeah, it's not the world. I remember lots of guys back probably either 10 or 15 years ago who had actually made the argument that because I used a Mac, I was
Oh,
fine. You know
right,
what I
right,
mean? It's like,
totally. It,
so a little different now.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. And you're right. That was the mindset, all the time. It's like, well, if we just switch to Macs, we'd be fine. But that's, yeah, not the case any longer.
Right, exactly. Um, actually, we covered kind of the the IoT devices a little bit, but that actually does kind of uh, split out a little bit into, how do you balance the convenience versus the security, in your opinion? Like,
Well, I think it's, that's the thing I always tell people, right? Is I will work with you to strike a balance, right? Because I understand that if it was me, I'd say, okay, let's shut down every port out there. Let's shut down every potential opportunity for a threat. But you
mhm,
can't, right? You still have to conduct business, but you have to make sure people are educated, right? I mean, the biggest threat, and this isn't anything new. You read this all the time, is the end user, right?
mhm,
The end user clicking on something that, unbeknownst to them, is malicious, putting
right,
in their credentials into some application that they feel is sent out to them by the company, when in fact it's not. And so I think it's really, working with the company to help them understand, okay, security has to be a top of mind, top priority, but at the
mhm,
same time, business has to happen. Our sales team has to be out there selling. That we can't shut everybody down from getting their job done, but what we can do is the areas that we feel are, again, back to that whole risk assessment.
mhm,
If we feel these are areas of higher risk, what are we doing about that, right? What are we doing to mitigate that or treat that risk? And maybe it's through a more, you know, uh, pinpointed training program, right? Specific people, that maybe have more access to information, that you say, you know what, just a quarterly generic training isn't good enough for them, right? We need to,
right,
really do hands-on, in-person, talk about, threats together. Because I think that's, you know, companies have, we have to coexist, right? Security, IT, kind of being one umbrella. A lot of times, the tagline was always, we become the department of no, right? No, you can't.
right,
You can't have that. You can't do it, whatever,
mhm,
right? But it has to be about, nope, business has to continue with the proper protections in place. And now how are we partnering with the business, right? I
mhm,
think that's where the opportunity lies, is getting out into the business and interacting, whether it's the finance team, the ops team, the sales team, the HR team, um, and to really understand the challenges they have and to
Hmm.
how you partner together, because they've got objectives they need to meet within the company. The security team does as well, and it's I think you mentioned IoT a little bit, but one of the other things that was an attack vector that you kind of think about and you're like, well, cameras, security cameras that are connected to
Oh,
the
yeah.
network. Okay,
Hmm.
so now they have an IP address and you can connect to them. Are you securing them? And it's
Right.
you have to think about every possible area.
Okay, we had to take a little bit of a break there, but we're back again. And let's pivot a little bit, actually. I was curious, how does an organization best use CISO or let's say a virtual CISO if they're not quite ready for a full one?
Well, I think you really have to determine what type of model works best. You can do it. Some of these virtual CISOs, you're going to do it based on, hey, I'll give you 10 hours a week.
Hmm.
We can base it off of objectives. Certain things you want me to come in and do. Maybe you want me to come in and help define 5 policies and roll them out to your team.
Hmm.
And you really have to define what works best. But I think really you need to make sure you build in that accountability, that you understand, okay, because even VCSOs are not cheap. They're
Right.
expensive resources that if anybody that you bring on that's good and has the experience should be able to come in and have a playbook and be able to say, like I mentioned earlier, let's start with that risk assessment, right? Let's
Yeah.
understand what is the playing field.
Hmm.
Let's understand where your assets are, and let's understand the threats, right? And what's keeping them awake at night. But I think that's you have to start there. Then once you go and this VC so works through kind of an initial assessment with the different departments,
Hmm.
um, even just the IT team to start with to understand kind of with the computing space, what's being done is you then have a point in time that says, okay, here's
Hmm.
where we're at today. And again, like I mentioned earlier, where do we want to be, right?
Right.
Because you could say, you know, I don't ever need to be 5 world class in this area because it's not something we really focus on, right?
Right.
Um, but I think metrics, getting the right metrics in place so you can measure things of how you're improving is,
Hmm.
you know, okay, if you roll out a security training program, well, is everybody taking the course? Or do you only have 50% of them doing it? You have
Yeah.
to, as a company, the culture within that company has to, really mandate that security mindset. Your management team, all the way from your leadership, your managers down to your, individual employees, has to understand that it's not negotiable. That is
Yeah.
part of my job. The deadline
Mhm.
is this date. I have to have it done by that. But that's where you have to start to track your compliance. We say 100% of our employees must take training. We want the number of local admin counts, right? Being people who have elevated access to be less than 5% of our team, right? Or whatever that is. Because
Mhm.
too often that local admin becomes easy to hand out to say, hey, you know what? If I just make them local admin, they can take care of their own environments, right? But that is such a huge mistake
Yeah.
because,
Agreed.
well, that's a whole nother topic for a different day. But really, if you put those proper metrics in place to help, again, base it off of that NIST cybersecurity framework, that
Mhm.
how are we, quarter over quarter, track those metrics to say how are we doing in this space, right? Um, are we running, our vulnerability scans internally and externally? Maybe are we investing in a penetration test, right? Have we paid an
Yep.
outside firm to say, can you penetrate our environment? To know,
That's a good test, actually. Yeah.
I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, that was something that we got to at Comworks. We did annually. We did
Hmm.
annual pen tests. Um, we were doing like quarterly scans, but it really because of the amount of threats out there, we started doing them weekly.
Oh, wow. Well, you
So,
actually brought up a really good point, and this goes across pretty much anything. It's same with like let's say data governance is the leadership buy-in. I mean, I agree with you that that's so important because I mean it only takes one manager to be like, it's not that important, or we're special or whatever, and then then you got a totally exposed attack vector, and it you know game over, right?
well, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, um, I what I find when I talk to some of the security guys is, it can actually be kind of like it's kind of a I don't want to say pessimistic field, but it's like you have to have the mindset of there's always bad people ready to do bad things. But it's also nice to hear about the fun and interesting things a little bit too. You know what I mean? So I guess I'm curious, like in security, what has you excited, or what do you really like going on in the industry right now?
Well, one of the things you just mentioned was I am probably one of those worst case scenario type thinkers. My family would tell you that as well, because I definitely more towards you know, hey, what's the worst thing that could happen and protect myself against that.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, some of the best things happening is is the awareness, right? People
Hmm.
understanding this is an area they need to invest in. They need to take action. The thing I would really warn people against is there are so many different vendors out there trying to push products to say, hey, if you just buy this, it'll fix everything. There is no
Right.
one size fits all. Um, I've worked with people that always say, hey, if you feel good by seeing a bunch of blinking lights in the data center, you're probably doing the wrong thing, right? You can't just buy an appliance, put it in, and think everything's good now, because you have to. That might fix one area that's a threat, but
Hmm.
there's so many others, and what are you doing about it, right? So, I mean, you have to have a well-rounded information security program that really
Hmm.
touches on all the key aspects. Number one, like I said, really educating your end users. And I think, like you
Yeah.
you just said, Eric, I mean, you have to your leadership team. That's one of the core tenets of any infosec program is what is that tone at the top? Is the
Yep.
board and your core leadership, ownership in the business, whatever, are they driving this? Because if
Hmm.
they're not, I'm sorry, but you're wasting your time. Because
Right.
if they're just going to say, well, Greg, you go do your own thing, and they expect me to get 100% compliance without them pushing the initiative, it's just not
Hmm.
going to work. So,
Yep.
but I think that's, again, back to what's exciting now. That's what's changing as well, because people understand that. People that discussion's much easier than it was 5, 10 years ago, right? Because
Right.
now people know, yes, of course the board has to be behind it. Yes, of course the leadership has to. And so, I mean, that's exciting. There's new advancements. I mean, and how passwords are being you know tracked and changed, and whether it's biometric, whether it's MFA, there's the continual challenge of how can we do it better? How can we do it more secure, right?
Right.
And that I think is super exciting. This is an area that is never well. I don't think so that it will ever go away. The threat
Hmm.
continues to grow. Bad people will always continue to come after us that are trying to steal others' money or others' proprietary information or intellectual property. And you have to have more good people like me and the teams that I've worked with that um, really just want to do well, want to protect their clients' best interests, want to work
Hmm.
to educate users. But the thing I'll also mention quick, Eric, is it's one thing just to put policies and procedures in place,
Hmm.
but are we actually following them? What are we
Right.
doing if people don't follow them? And I think that's, you know, it can't be again about checking the boxes, right?
Hmm.
We got to make sure that we're actually, you know, living what we say we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
in these policies and procedures. And you have to continually audit yourself against that, because if you're
Yeah.
not, people get, you know, sidetracked, get busy, and realize, well, you know what, if Greg doesn't care about that, or if he's not asking me, he must not care. So I'll focus on these other things. So I think that's you know some of the areas. I think some of the other cool things too is around the whole machine learning, artificial intelligence space, right?
Oh, okay.
Those areas, and how security is being used in those spaces, how those have become more of a threat vector as well.
Like detection, you mean? As
Right,
far as figuring out
right.
potential ones through this
Yeah,
is weird behavior or
yep,
something like
yep.
that. Sure.
Looking for that, kind of, that learning, that over time that it starts to, okay, it learns my environment, and it knows when it can kind of detect that anomaly to say, hey, Eric's never done this before, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
something weird that Eric is doing that might be something we should look closer at, right? So that's
Right.
where you put these, machines into environments that can start to learn behaviors of your people. It gets pretty interesting. So I
Yeah.
think that's a space that it's not new. I mean, that's happening today, right? But I think
Mhm.
it'll become much more commonplace.
Yeah, I remember like 18 years ago, like you'd have these devices that would look at packets and look for
Yep,
kind of weird
yep,
stuff, but it was very much uh, rule based, and,
yep.
and you were also limited by the resources you could dedicate to it. Right, there's
Well,
only so much computing power, and nowadays it's a very different world.
yep. No, and like you just said, it's about, okay, hey, these are the security logs. This is what we want to look at. So you had to
Mm-hmm.
define that criteria, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you basically put, this you put the machine learning in place in your environment where it can
Mm-hmm.
basically learn everything, and you're not basically putting criteria and rules in place. You're letting it openly learn. And I think that's where it's uncovering things that maybe you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
So,
It, which is all well and good until you get to something like Skynet, and then
right,
if you
right.
don't watch your AI overlords, then
Yep.
who knows what. I'm just
uh,
kidding.
no, I was like, wait, yes, you're right.
how, how about like just when you look at over your career in IT, both in leadership as well as more in the doing, like what are some of the coolest moments in your career that you really enjoyed and think about fondly?
I had the opportunity, Eric, and you were part of my team for a while, and
I
as a
was.
contractor, in full disclosure, um, but I had the opportunity to have a great team. Honestly, it's around. You're only. I felt like I was only as good as my team was, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was having a team that understood what my expectations were, that understood that, hey, when we commit to a date, we meet the date, we get the
Mm-hmm.
job done, we took care of our end users. And so it was being able to, you know, work within a team that really had each other's back. And so
Right.
that's, one of the, when I talk about team, and I talk about, leaders on my team, I had leaders that, understood how to take care of their teams, how
Mm-hmm.
to treat them right, and kind of leading with that servant leadership mindset, right? To understand, what, if I'm not willing to jump into the trench too, then why would I ask them to do it? And I was always that way, right? Where, hey, if we had events after hours, we had maintenance, I was there. I might not have been the guy pressing the buttons or putting, typing the keys, but I was there to support the team, make sure they had what they needed to be successful. And so, um, one of the other cool things that I got to do that, I had a large, for a point in time, I led a managed services at Comworks,
Oh, okay.
and was able to traveled to Germany 4 different times to go meet with one of our largest clients that was based in Germany. And having that experience, had never traveled to Europe before, and to go there 4 different times over the course of a couple years was a super fun experience. Just to see how things were done there, to meet with them. I was doing the point of my visits was quarterly business reviews, to sit down with them, show them how are we performing, uh, look for areas that we could be doing better, look for areas of opportunity. So it was a great time, uh,
Yeah.
and loved the opportunity to travel, see different parts of the world. Was very, very fun. But I think some of the other cool things was we did a lot of mergers and acquisitions at Comworks.
Hmm.
In the early days, we were acquiring a lot of companies. Working through that was a lot of fun, challenging but fun.
Yeah, that's so.
Um, we had a lot of system conversions, a lot of new businesses, a lot of new products we purchased, and just to be a part of that and the experience that I had at Comworks was phenomenal. And working with our CEO was just we had this mutual trust between each other, right? That we had each other's back. He trusted me to do my job and
Mm.
trusted me with my team, and I think we delivered well. Well, we delivered to the point where he was able to sell the business and move on, and it's been a great journey. And where
Yeah,
it goes next, it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
yeah, exactly. That's really That's really awesome to hear. I actually can say too, you talked about servant leadership and having your teams back, and I can actually say from experience that was one thing that I really appreciated because I mean everybody's had plenty of managers where it's clear the crap rolled downhill, and you know especially when the heat is on, it's like, well, having three levels of management. Critiquing every keystroke you make is not at all helpful, and having that pressure off really allows you to shine and kind of rise above the heat. I mean, in a way that's helpful to everybody. So that is one thing I appreciated working. So that's pretty
Well,
nice.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you actually experienced, because that was one of the things that I always told my team was, let me be the shield, right?
Hmm.
Let
Hmm.
me, let me have you do your job. In your case, it was let you develop the portal and do things, for us. And if somebody's not happy with it, send them to me. Let me
Hmm.
deal with that. Um, and I always just felt that was the thing that I could do and do well, right? Was, hey, maybe there's times where we needed to make course corrections and do things, but that should come through me. And
Yeah.
I always, you want to make sure your team's got the right tools, um,
Hmm.
and whether it's the right equipment, to do the job well, but also felt like they were protected to know, hey, Greg's got my back. Um, and he's going to well, stand up for me, right, and help
Yeah.
deal with that, so I can take and really focus on what I do best. And like in your case, it was coding, right?
Hmm.
And building databases and building portals. And so it was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. We had a lot of fun in those years. We had a great team. We had a big team. And
Yeah.
I think that was the thing. We just worked well with each other, right? We had our
Right.
business applications team that interfaced well with our infrastructure team, that interfaced well with our endpoint end user team. And it's amazing what you can do when people work well with each other, whether it's in business,
Hmm.
whether it's on sports teams. If you all have each other's back, you can become champions. And that's
Yeah.
I feel
Exactly.
we were leaders in our space.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I can agree more. So what are you up to nowadays? Like, how can people find you if they want to ask more about
Well,
security or anything like
reach
that?
reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and would be thrilled to meet with anybody, whether it's just a virtual chat like this,
Hmm.
whether it's over a coffee, a lunch, a happy hour. You know, connect with me. Would certainly love to work with you, mentor people, right? I mean, that's one of the big
Yeah.
things that I've really enjoyed is working with younger people that are just looking to get into this. And I shouldn't just say younger people because I've also had friends that are, kind of the half point in their career where it's like, well, I think I want to get into security, Greg. How would I do
Mm.
that? So, I mean, I don't care your age, reach out to me if you have any questions, right? And
Yeah.
one of the things, Eric, that I didn't point out earlier was, in 2019, I went and got my certified information security manager title or
Yeah.
certification. But this past winter, a local security company, cybersecurity company called FR Secure, I've used them for years at Comworks. They do great work, a great company, great leadership. Um, they offered a first ever to take a certified virtual CISO course and
Oh,
took
wow.
that. Their founder actually led the course. It was over a course of months. And this summer I sat for the exam. So now I'm officially a certified virtual CISO. The company that actually did it was, I think it's FR Secure's sister company, Security Studio, is who it's through. But if anybody's watching this and you want to get more into the world of CISO or fractional CISO leadership, go check out Security Studio or hit me up on that, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. So,
Awesome.
right these days, I'm doing a lot with, I'm kind of that jack of all trades in the cybersecurity world, right? I'm doing a
Mm.
fair amount of odd work around ISO 27001, around
Mm.
SOC 2. I'm also dealing with all the aspects of what it takes to run an information security program and how to
Yep.
deliver that to our clients. So it's been an interesting journey, and like I mentioned earlier, in this field and in cybersecurity, it's one that never ends. We're learning every day. We're learning how to respond to new threats every day. And so if you're not learning, well, you're falling behind quickly.
Yeah. That's for sure. Well,
So,
thank you so much for coming on, Greg. I really appreciate it, and it was a fun conversation. I definitely gave me a lot more to think about as far as security. And
well, hey,
yeah,
hopefully we at least reach somebody that
yeah,
hopefully it helped them understand, hey, my unique journey and how I got to where I am today. But no, thank you, Eric. Thank you for what you're doing out there. You do great work. You're a great person,
thank
and
you.
I wish you all the best too. And look forward to continuing to partner together.
Yeah, well, awesome. Thanks, and thanks everyone for listening to my podcast number two with Greg Thayer. I'm sorry, with Greg Thayer. And if you need to reach out for anything, feel free to contact Greg. And if you're curious about anything about what I'm up to, feel free to either reach out on LinkedIn or go to my website, coveringdata.com. Thank
Thanks,
you and
Eric.
have a good day. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to the Covering Data podcast. If you'd like to learn more about how I can help you with your database needs, check out my website at coveringdata.com or email me at eric@coveringdata.com. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks.